Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Developing Competent Project Managers for the Renewable Energy Industry. I'm Kevin Iguano. I'll be your host for today. This is one in a series of regular webinars we'll be running throughout the year. In fact, we have 36 of them scheduled for this year, so better than one every couple weeks. And this is one of in this series. They typically run around noon Eastern time. Some of them run in the evenings, 8 to 9 p.m., and there's a couple in the afternoons, but at various times. But all of them will be recorded and later put up on YouTube for later viewing. So for those of you watching this live, welcome. Thank you for attending. For those of you watching this later via YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and you'll be notified of the next webinars in the series. Okay, some housekeeping and logistics. As Lars goes through his presentation today, we're going to ask you to hold off on asking and answering questions until the end of the event. So we want to get through the main presentation first, and we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. For those of you attending the live event, on your web interface, you'll see a questions icon. It looks like a little box with a question mark in it. And in the questions window, you can enter any questions you have as they arise during the session. Just dump them in there so we have record of them. Some of you who have downloaded and installed the phone app may not have a questions window, but you'll have a chat box. That works too. Just dump your questions in there as you think of them so we collect them. And at the end, we will go through those questions and ask them of Lars to clarify or revisit any points that he had. Okay, excellent. So you do collect PDUs for this event, and I'll talk more about that at the end. So without further ado, let's tell you a little bit about Lars. Lars Johannesen is a passionate management professional with a drive for business excellence. He's an experienced senior manager driving productivity and team development with over 15 years experience working in the renewable energy industry. He's held positions with global, regional, and country level responsibilities. So tons of experience, lots to tell us today. His experiences have given him the competencies to operate complex projects with innovative approaches. He uses his energetic drive to systematically solve problems and create quality solutions. He has specialist level knowledge in project management offices, or PMOs, team management, productivity management, lean project management, using KPIs, business development, concept development, and much, much more. Lars's educational background includes a double degree as a business development engineer and a master's of management. He's also accredited as a lead auditor for several ISO certifications. We're really delighted to have him here. Lars, welcome.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and much appreciate the opportunity of conducting this webinar today.
Excellent. I'm going to turn it over to you. Talk to us about developing competent project managers in the renewable energy industry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin, and delighted to be here today, and delighted to have participants here who are interested and motivated to hear me talking about development of competent project managers. So I'm really happy with the series of webinars conducted by Procept and now being a part of delivering these webinars. I think you're going to see, for those of you who've had the opportunity of joining one of these webinars, that there's certainly a good connection between them. A few weeks ago, we heard Kevin talk a little bit about what PMI offers. We heard Kevin talking about what IPMA offers. And today, I'm going to also focus a little bit about how we, from a company perspective, benefit from these frameworks and actually use these frameworks in order to develop our project managers. So you're going to see lots of examples, and you're going to see lots of information pertaining to how we develop project managers, and then hopefully you'll get some recommendations that you can apply yourself in your own organizations, or maybe even help contribute to your own development plans. Today, I will be your presenter, and I have more or less 4 different modules that I'm going to go through. And again, as Kevin, he said, please do come up with the questions, and then we'll address those in the end. And please use the emojis as well throughout the presentation. As you see here on the welcome screen, many industries are experiencing rapid transformations due to technological innovations and global competition. And that certainly also applies in the renewable energy industry. So I'm going to focus a lot on the wind power side, where I've been working, as Kevin stated, for over the last 15 years. We have seen a tremendous development, and that also means that part of my presentation here today will also talk a little bit about renewables in general, but also in terms of some of the products. What requirement does that bring to the project managers in making sure that they develop in a manner that is both beneficial for their own, let's say, career progression, but also that meets the requirements of the companies and certainly the customers that we serve. Companies need skilled project managers that can adapt and embrace change, learn how to drive growth and development of your project management community with examples from the renewable energy industry. And here also throughout the webinar, I'll actually show pictures and relate to specific examples where we've been doing competent development activities such as trainings and stuff like that. So really trying to tie it all together with a very operational focus throughout the session. The objectives of the webinar will be to focus on how PMs can grow and adapt in times of rapid change, building strong PM communities, using digital tools to achieve project excellence. We talk a lot about on a day-to-day basis topics like artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, but also within the renewable industry and certainly within Siemens, we, for instance, have a long range of specific IT application that we simply need to know about how to prepare, how to execute, and how to use them to our benefit. And that also accounts for project managers. So you have a lot of different requirements of how we enable project managers to do what project managers do best, deliver projects in a successful manner. Again, I represent also here Siemens Energy, who I work for on a day-to-day basis, and therefore in the webinar today, I'm going to show you specific examples from Siemens. If I move on a little bit, then you can see here also that we will have the specific cases, and I'll try to tie it into the IPMA project management framework, and in general how to develop a good competence framework that combines trainings, development planning, and then take into consideration benefits from our IPMA project management framework. So a lot of exciting stuff to come here over the next 50 minutes or so. But first and foremost, a little bit of an introduction, and of course, thank you very much, Kevin, of having me here and introducing me on a first glance. On a day-to-day basis, I work for Siemens Energy Wind Power. I've worked in the renewable energy industry since 2007, and on a day-to-day basis, I'm heading the platform product and operational readiness team. I know that's quite a mouthful, but in short, I manage a team of 15 project and product managers. They reside in 15 in many different countries. Typically, they are senior project managers, and I'm extremely proud of the team we have in Siemens. And certainly, development growth is a big part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. I am born and raised in Denmark, but since 2014, I lived in Canada, and that also means that I'm now happy to say that I'm also a Canadian citizen. On a professional basis, beyond working for Siemens Energy, then I'm also a business owner of Project Nord Consulting, registered here in Ontario. And then I have the strong pleasure of being an independent contractor operating for Procept and being part of the team of Kevin in this regards. I have an educational background, as Kevin stated, as an MBA and a business development engineer. And then I'm really strongly passionate not only about renewable energy, but also about project management. I've been part of project management assessments, both within Siemens, but also engaged heavily on topics within the IPMA framework, delivering trainings, delivering coaching, delivering mentors, and also I have both a PMI certification and an IPMA certification. And I'll also talk a little bit about how do we deal with these many frameworks and what do we see from a business perspective on what really works. And hopefully, again, that can be contributions for your own development. I want to start though by setting this a little bit into context. I think before we talk about the development of the project managers themselves, then it's important to understand a little bit about what is wind power, what are some of the products, what makes this a challenging situation for our project managers. And here I'm also going to talk a little bit about volume and certainly activities in Canada. I do know and acknowledge, of course, we may have representatives and participants of this webinar outside of Canada, but I did want to also show a little bit about some of the numbers and volume in general. So let's start with the wind power context and strategy. So here you see Canada's current installed wind capacity. You see and hear, of course, from a political perspective, that there's a lot of attention to climate change. And here, of course, I'm a strong proponent and extremely motivated for driving green renewable energy. In Canada, you've also seen that Canada's wind and solar capacity has grown 46% in the past 5 years, and installed capacity is now more than 24 gigawatts. You see installations across our provinces, and in general, of course, I'm extremely proud of what I've seen in the industry over the years, not just in Canada, but worldwide, in terms of the focus and growth in our installed capacities. Of course, we have here many different players in the industry, where Siemens is merely one of them. But I also see a truly admirable industry where we also work together in different forums. For instance, in Canada, via the CanRIA organization, where we meet up and discuss what we need to do, also from a political perspective, in order to influence policy making and drive growth within this important topic. If I focus a little bit beyond Canada, then I wanted to also share a couple of highlights specifically here. So you'll see Canada has 341 wind energy projects producing power across the country. You have globally, solar energy costs have declined 83%. That also means, in general, in regards to the cost side, then a lot of things has happened over the years. You'll see that Canada's total wind, solar, and storage installed capacity grew 46% in the past years. And then lastly, Canada ranks 9th in the world for installed wind energy capacity. As you hear, then I am born and raised in Denmark, a country where we have a deep admiration for renewable energy. We have wind turbines both onshore, we have wind turbines offshore, and certain days we produce all our electricity from renewable energy. We've come very far, but I'm also super happy about how far Canada has come within this area, and that this becomes a very important agenda point in politics in many different countries around the world. If I look a little bit on wind power, and I wanted to bring into this webinar some specific examples on some of our wind farms. I'm hoping that we do have participants who share this passion for renewable energy and wind power here in the call, and maybe even we have some colleagues who's familiar with some of these wind farms, where most of these pictures are from Canada. For instance, one of the wind farms that I'm sharing pictures of here today is from the Grand Bend wind farm, close to the water, and I will say, stepping up in a wind turbine in many meters height is just incredible. Hop heights for some of these newer wind turbines, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a later slide, but we have hop height going over 100 meters and far beyond that as well. So it is a truly exciting experience. One of the questions for those maybe less familiar with renewable energy and wind turbines is that, yes, typically we would have an elevator available within the wind turbines, but yes, it can certainly be a demanding job to be a wind service technician, but also a very exciting job, as you also see here on the screen, with pictures from regular maintenance being conducted on our wind turbines. So when it comes to the project management pieces here, then of course there's a project management aspect in many different areas of this industry. But for instance, for our side within Siemens, you have a focus on, for instance, the project execution side, where you install and erect the turbines. And that's one focus. Another focus here is also on the service execution, where typically when customers, they purchase a wind farm, then you'll see that they purchase the installation and erection of the wind turbine, but also a service maintenance agreement. So kind of similar to when you purchased a car and would potentially both purchase a car and a service agreement. And then within that service agreement, we have preventive maintenance, we have corrective maintenance, we have diagnostic centers around the world where we monitor the different turbines to make sure that they are healthy and understand that we have potential alarms that we need to operate within. And that also leads to, again, some of the competency requirement that we have for our project managers being responsible for these type of projects. If I move in a little bit from now the wind power side and into the Siemens role in wind power, then I'll share a couple of things from our side. So Siemens Gamesa is a leading global provider of wind power products and service solutions. It's number one in offshore, prominent in onshore, with service integrated for optimal performance. Siemens Gamesa is 100% owned by Siemens Energy, which also means, for instance, from a Canada perspective, then our legal entity is within Siemens Energy. We are headquartered in Canada, just outside of Toronto in Oakville, and many people may be familiar with the Siemens building of the Queen Elizabeth Highway here around the GTA. Siemens Gamesa was founded in April 2017 as a merger of Siemens Wind Power and Gamesa, and is a global company based in Zamudio in Spain. We have roughly around 28,000 employees. In regards to the technology and stuff, then from a Siemens perspective, also to understand the basis for our project managers is that we have over 118 gigawatt installed worldwide. You can take that into consideration with what I said also about Canada's installed capacity. We have over 74 gigawatts under service, and over 30,000 wind turbines serviced worldwide. We're creating innovative solutions based on proven track record and technological excellence, optimizing performance through tailored product configuration, enhanced operations, and taking a customer-centric approach, allowing complete control and flexibility. That means also the customer relations is something that we build upon quite early in the sales phase before we actually start executing our projects. Obviously here there's a lot of policies involved as well in the development of wind farms that start years before we actually start executing our projects. So the relationship handling is an extremely important part of project management activities within Siemens. If I look a little bit on the technical advancement of our industry, then certainly a lot of things has also happened. So you see increased power output, efforts for circularity and modularization are key trends to watch for in the future. So I talked a little bit about hub heights of over 100 meters. And to be honest, nowadays we talk even about hub heights on the onshore market of 165 to 185 meters. And that's quite extraordinary, to be honest. If you look here on the slide to the left, we have an infographic of an early wind turbines, 22 kilowatt, and you'll see that that was invented in Denmark in, I believe, 1982, so almost very similar to my own age. And it is incredible how long we have come with an industry since then in over 40 years. I mean, it's pretty incredible, and you'll see that over 300 times the power output what we see today. Some of the newer turbines here, you have an SD 6.6 170 and SD 7.0 170, which are some of our new next generation onshore platforms within Siemens Energy Wind Power. So quite a journey, but that also means again that the technical requirement of our project managers to understand quite complex products is one of the things to consider when we talk about development of our project managers, and again enabling them to deliver projects successfully. If I look at the customer relationships, because I do want to highlight from a project management perspective, of course, the customer is extremely important. So here I also took the approach here on the slide in order to share with you what are the specific aspects of those customer relationships. So as I stated, then we do have a long time customer commitment, and again, some of our service contract may last up to 35 years. And that also means it's extremely important to establish that close partnership. So you see here our customers' onshore wind project development takes time. Siemens Gamesa onshore are typically involved during maturation, manufacturing, and construction. Our standard scope include component manufacturing, transportation, turbine installation and commissioning. We have capabilities in place to offer extended scope and other services. In a project-centric organization, we run a diligent project categorization process that determines how we manage our projects, meaning that there's a framework in place that goes in and determine also what are the specific different categories of our projects, and how do we use that in order to drive a competence and training framework that actually works. And this is one of the key aspects that I'll talk about when I introduce IPMA in this webinar here today, because I think within Siemens, the differentiation of our project in categories, for instance, A, B, C, and small project, actually links very well to what we see in the project management framework of IPMA. Also meaning that when we look at the hiring, development of project managers, then of course we try to take that into consideration when we do assignment of projects to the right project managers. And I think this is really a key combination. We manage our projects in a clearly defined and standardized way along project gates and milestones, meaning that in terms of project management governance, then we also help our project managers to understand, okay, we have a life cycle in place. We have a particular process that supports that, and that has specific milestones, you have specific gates, and you have specific deliverable that need to be managed within that life cycle process. And again, the reason why I say that is because that enables the project managers to successfully deliver our projects based on best practices, based on lessons learned we capture, and based on continuous improvements, so that once we execute project, you collect lessons learned, and then you optimize the processes. But from a development perspective of project managers, then it's of course also interesting and super important to make sure that the project managers they have specific knowledge pertaining to those processes, and how do you ensure that that knowledge is updated over time. And that's some of the considerations I want to talk about, and how, yes, you may have a project management framework that serves as an enabler for the development, but it's not enough, because we have requirements in so many different areas. And hopefully here over the remaining time of the webinar, I can give you some of the ingredients about how I see these things working in Siemens, but also think that can work in other industries and for other projects. So let me try to now go in from we heard about the wind power context, we heard about the product, we heard about technological advancements, we saw a little bit about Siemens' role and how we do projects and stuff. But let me now start zooming in on what we're here to talk about with the project managers, and what requirements there is that feeds into the development framework that we conduct with them. So here I'll go into a little bit details on the project manager requirements. And I kind of like this infographic where you have a technical strong project manager here portrayed. And I want to talk a little bit about what are some of those aspects that I find important ingredients for really developing a framework that is working efficiently for our project managers. So one thing in big organization that you may also be very familiar with is here from a Siemens perspective is leadership essentials. That means from a company perspective, we have a strategy. That strategy drives objectives in different levels of the organization. And here we operate with certain leadership essentials based on the values of the company. And I think knowing the strategy, knowing the strategic foundation of the company that you represent is extremely important, because that links to many of the competences that is required. And certainly when it comes to decision making, when it comes to partnerships, when it comes to engaging on a multitude of activities, then knowing the strategy helps setting the boundaries of how you act on a day-to-day basis. So that was one of the key ingredients that I wanted to highlight. The other one that goes back to my talk about the specific turbines and how they have developed over time is of course also Siemens wind power specifics, which means that within your given organization and entity, I'm sure there's specific ways of doing things and specific product related criteria and requirement that you need to be aware of, whether that is on an overall product level or, for instance, on main component level. I also talked a little bit about different type of contracts that we execute, whether that is, for instance, the installation and erection of the turbine, or if it's the service contract. There is specific knowledge that is required by the project managers in order to fully understand what is our services to the customers, but maybe also more importantly, what are then some of the sales opportunities that goes beyond the contractual agreements. From the wind industry side, I also said that from an industry perspective, I quite admire what has been happening in renewable energy over the years. And some of you may be familiar with the Global Wind Organization, or in short called DWO. Why do I want to highlight this in a webinar about project management development? That is because within the DWO, you have key players in the industry who meet on an ongoing basis. And within that organization, there is a determination to establish, let's say, standard requirements for the development of different roles, and in particular, for instance, for service technicians. So what has started and been in place for years is, to be honest, specific standardized trainings, for instance, on DWO first aid trainings, DWO manual handling training, DWO first aid, and now the industry have also begun standardizing other types of training. So, for instance, in regard to work with bolt tensioning and torque, but also a long range of other topics is now being discussed amongst key players in the industry in order to standardize and make sure that we have an efficient way of working, a safe way of working, and minimum standards about how we need to operate with the wind turbines. And that's why I do think that even for project managers, it's important to understand what are those opportunities, what are those restrictions, what are those learnings available that is not only for our technician roles, but also relevant for our project managers, who would typically be responsible, for instance, for resource management planning, and thereby development of some of the other core roles in the project teams. If I go a little bit beyond the industry side, then we also have digital tools and applications. So we talk about artificial intelligence. I'm sure many of you are familiar with, for instance, ChatGPT, but certainly within the renewable industry, we have many different digital tools and applications. Of course, for instance, whether that being organizational specific, whether you, for instance, use the Microsoft suite with Teams, Planner, and whatnot, then there's a long range of other IT applications that may be specific to the specific entity that you operate for. Those things can, for instance, be how do we calculate the power output? How do we calculate availability of our wind turbines? What are some of the systems that we use to monitor, for instance, weather, which is extremely important also in this industry, not just from a production of energy perspective, but also in terms of planning when we do, for instance, main component exchanges. What is the softwares that we use for project management, for instance? What are the softwares we use for planning, requirements management, HSE? What tools do we use for reporting of safety incidents and proactive reporting? What systems do we use for quality management? That could be non-conformances, non-conformance cost. I mean, you name it. There's a broad range of project management topics where we have digital tools and applications. And it is important for the project managers to be aware what are some of those tools, who is using them, why are we using them, what do we need to do. So that also means, again, I would say that's a key ingredient to really enabling project managers to successfully lead the project. Beyond that, then from a project manager's perspective, then I wanted to tie now a little bit into the IPMA framework. So you'll see within the IPMA framework, we operate for project managers competency development within 3 different perspective groups. And you heard potentially some of you, Kevin, talk about this a couple of weeks ago, but IPMA provides an experience-focused competency development framework. And here you have the elements of perspective elements, personal elements, and practice elements. And within these 3 different element groups, then you have 28 competency elements. And I think that's a framework that really works well because it touches base on a lot of different criteria for the project managers. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how you potentially use that in order to grow and develop your project managers. But that again requires attention to competency elements well described within the IPMA framework, for instance, in regards to quality management, for instance, in regards to influencing procurement, a lot of different topics. And that also why when I kind of try to brainstorm about what are some of the key ingredients for our project managers, then there's certainly not only one ingredient, but there's many different ingredients that we need to structure when we build a well-working competence framework. If I look a little bit about the processes and the type of projects, then I think from a Siemens perspective, I think the governance is quite important. So we talk about a little bit of different type of projects that we would execute. And you typically have a sales process. And again, that can lead years, to be honest, with certain partners. And then you have maybe a project execution here called new unit that is responsible for the installation and erection of the wind turbines, and that can maybe be a project that has a time duration of, let's say, 6 to 24 months, depending, of course, of the complexity of the project, the country, the market, a lot of different criteria, but more or less, let's say, a 2-year time frame. And then you have a service execution model where we have the service contract, which can range from honestly 2 years up to 35 years, depending on the commitment from the customer. And from a project manager's perspective, ensuring that you are familiar with some of the right steps, for instance, in the sales process, making sure that you contribute with valuable lessons learned from the project manager side is extremely key, that we sell the right things and we have the right contracts to offer. From a new unit execution and service execution, it's important that we understand what are some of the specific steps that enables the project managers to deliver successfully. And here, I would like to think a good project manager also influence how these processes look like, so that we go back, take into consideration lessons learned, and then impact about our governance models in general. Because often you're going to see that a lot of the steps incorporated in the processes have multiple regulations that goes in and help address why we do it, how we do it, what we do, and by when we do it. So I think that's important when we talk about the development, to make sure that that is well understood. And that's also one of the aspects that's well described in the IPMA framework. But here we see it applied directly in an organization, which I'm sure that would also be the case for many of you who's driving projects in the world. If I look a little bit about the internal and external requirements and how you translate that to our roles, then one of the roles I wanted to talk a little bit about today and focus in on is the so-called operational readiness project manager role. So you can see the mission of this role is to ensure projects are operationally ready before execution begins, smooth, organized, and no surprises. That also means that in general, when we have sold a service contract, for instance, then let's say 24 months leading up to the start of that contract, there's a lot of activities that needs to be in place. And that what we in Siemens call the operational readiness process. All these activities is being managed by a project manager who's responsible for the overall successful enablement of those service contracts. You have readiness planning, prepare and manage readiness checklists, confirm all required preparations are complete, team coordination, connect project, technical, operational team, align roles, actions, and timelines, risk and issue awareness, certain risk management, opportunity management is extremely important. You have day-to-day actions, track progress, communicate clearly, support meetings, and in general, driving and managing your stakeholders. Core skills required: strong organization, clear communication, cross-team collaboration, problem-solving mindset, calm under pressure, and a lot of the other topic that we talked about in the ingredients that I presented on the prior slide. We have a strong focus on continuous improvement, the capturing of lessons learned, improve the readiness process, and that means that quality mindset is important that we instill in our project managers. We are working with many different functions, which I'm sure you also do in your project, but it's important that we understand from the specific role, what are the tasks, what are the responsibilities, and who do we deliver to. Understanding those responsibilities enables us to do an assessment of what is actually required by the role. And when we understand what is required by the role, then we can start to talk about what trainings and competences are required to fulfill all these demanding tasks for our project managers. And I think that is key. Operational readiness, again, involves ensuring a wind farm is prepared for safe, efficient, and reliable long-term operations. Through comprehensive planning, testing, and training, bridging the gap between construction and active maintenance. You see here a couple examples of important areas for operational readiness project managers, which is a role we have in place across the world in Siemens Energy wind power. I work very close with our project managers to make sure that we understand how our competency framework works. We update and equip our project managers to successfully be deployed to projects around the world. And I think both the product side, the digital side, all these key ingredients are very important to be aware of, but also to improve over time. What is required 5 years ago is not what is required today, and that's the continuous improvement mindset that we need to have in everything we do. If I look a little bit about task and competency assessment, then we have project manager responsibilities aligned with our internal and external requirements. From an internal perspective, the processes that I showed earlier, they dictate specific deliverables, and that would typically shape at least a big point of the internal requirements. On the external requirement, that would typically come through engaging with the customer. So that could be, for instance, on the contract side, we analyze the contract, understand completely what's the scope and boundaries, what do we need to do, and then we manage those external requirements. So all these requirements are important when we talk about what competences are required. Role profiles established as part of the project governance infrastructure and set up, exactly what I talked about on the previous slide, that we understand what are the core roles in our projects and what are the specific competence and training requirements to each of them. Let's start by understanding what your role and responsibilities may be. And it's not only relevant for our project managers, but also to other roles that has a significant part of the teams, whether that being, for instance, our operations site managers, whether that being, for instance, our technical specialists, some of our HSE managers, quality managers in projects. I mean, many other roles where I think the mindset and stuff is a similar manner, where you go in and look at what are specific tasks, what are activities, and what thereby becomes the competence and training requirements, and then try to use that to build, let's say, a competency framework and model that is practical and easy to be deployed. Based on those tasks and responsibilities, the first steps towards defining competency expectations can be established. Completion of a task competency assessment allows our organization to evaluate what competence and training requirements we define. Typically, what we do is to conduct what we call an operational task assessment. So that means we go through those tasks, we go through those responsibilities, and then we carefully review what are the associated competency requirements. And then those competency requirements we then use to determine, okay, what are specific knowledge where we have, for instance, trainings available, or where we need to develop trainings. Maybe sometimes we also need to update trainings. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about in the specific project manager development section. If I go into a little bit of context here, we talk a little bit about IPMA. You heard me talking about the specific elements, the 28 competency elements that we had, and I think that is quite important. So overall foundation for development of our project managers matches well with the global framework by IPMA. The IPMA ICB is a global standard that defines the competency required by individuals working in the fields of project, program, and portfolio management. So IPMA serves some really strong framework in the area of project manager development. Within Siemens and the operational readiness side, we focus a lot on the project side. Here we have some specific individual competency baseline, which Kevin also talked quite a bit about a couple of weeks ago. So if you are interested in the history and stuff of IPMA, I would definitely encourage you to take a look at that recording on the Procept YouTube channel. Nonetheless, for us within Siemens, it's important to have a framework that's based on experience and not just competencies. I of course understand that. I also have myself a PMI project management professional certification, which I value very much. But what I do like very much about the IPMA certification that I also possess is the fact that here we have 28 competency elements. I've been through a certification process where it's been discussed over specific steps in the certification journey, how I have applied these competences on specific project situations, meaning that I possess the experience and knowledge in order to drive specific activities pertaining to these competency elements. And I think that is important, because then from a company perspective, we have a framework that not only focus on the competency side, but also focus on the experience side, because both aspects are extremely important. Also, you have, from a Siemens perspective, you have the categorization of projects. And those of you who may be familiar with the IPMA framework know that we certify within the IPMA framework on an A level, B level, C level, and that actually means that matches quite well also with the categorization that we utilize within our organization. If you move on, one of the other advantages here from an IPMA perspective is you have a global certification regulation available from IPMA for the assessment of project managers. You have a framework that's applied on a global basis through IPMA member associations. So that, for instance, matches well for big organizations to team up with IPMA partners in our regions. And here, for instance, from a Canada perspective, I can certainly highlight strong partnership between our organization, also with PMAC in Canada, and in the US with IPMA US. I'm also very happy with the collaboration with Procept and, for instance, Kevin here in our efforts to drive project management development. But the fact is that you have an organization that have member associations around the world, which also means that you as project managers have an organization that can support your own development with the IPMA framework. There's a regulation on certification in place. It provides also some flexibility in the way that you obtain your certification. And I think that works quite well, to be honest, with big organizations where we have a presence all around the world. For instance, in my team, we are 15 employees, and those people are in 5 different countries, which also mean again that if we partner up with IPMA associations in different countries, that makes things more manageable. Also, one of the things you will see is that the project management is a key for successful delivery of operational readiness. We have specific elements in our process that we need to deliver, but overall project management competences illustrated through IPMA in the 28 competency elements is extremely important as a basis for that development. IPMA as global standard for operational readiness is aligned with project excellence. That means, again, aligned with the different certification levels from A, B, C, and even project associate, which we use for our small projects. Experience-based certification going beyond specific knowledge requirements of the project management. So here we have the knowledge portion, but we also here from an IPMA perspective focus on the experience requirement. And I think that is extremely important. Projects are typically classified by these factors into levels to align with the 4-level certification system. So we have, for instance, low, non-complex, that is simple projects, straightforward, usually managed by level C or D professionals. Moderate complexity requires experience management. high complexity, large challenging projects needing significant experienced leadership, and then very complex, strategic, highly uncertain projects. And to be honest, within our organization, then we see projects in multiple categories. And I think it's important here to understand what are the development expectations that we put on to our project managers that allows them to grow in a manner that works well. I would say, of course, we have more projects on the lower and moderate complexity, but we also need, when we have more complex projects, then we need to make sure that we have project managers who can be assigned to these projects also of very high complexity. So if I continue a little bit about the specific competency framework at Siemens, then you can see we have training profiles for project management roles assigned via competency management system, meaning that, for instance, we have senior project managers who would be responsible for high complexity projects. We have project managers who are more responsible for lower complexity projects, and for instance, junior project managers who are more responsible for lower complexity projects. Tracking and compliance reporting will be used to drive attention, focus on project manager growth, targets, and development planning, which means that then we have specific system where we can go in and check compliance with the training and competence requirements. And if I show a little bit one of the systems that we use, then some systems are available part of our organization, but some systems are also part of third-party softwares, which you may also be familiar with in your organization. One of those learning platforms is Fuse, and that is used to establish specific training offerings on wind power specific knowledge requirements within the Siemens side. I know that Fuse as a learning platform is used for many different topics, but one of the things that I really like and why I consider this as a success within our organization is that it's a tool that's easy to use as a learning platform, and then it enables us in the organization to have our own subject matter experts making training plans. And that means that you can have your subject matter experts providing guidance, do video recordings, they can establish articles, best practices, and then it's all being tied together in a specific learning plan. So you as a user, maybe some of you are familiar with LinkedIn Learning and taking trainings there, you would go through a number of steps with different learning materials, whether that is videos, articles. That's the exact same thing we see with Fuse. But the cool thing is that we can have our expert, our people who actually live the topics on a day-to-day basis being part of driving these trainings. And I think that is pretty cool that you have our colleagues themselves conducting some of these trainings and thereby making it more specific to what we do within your organization. Lastly here, when it comes to specifics of the training and certification element, that's where I want to talk a little bit about what have we actually been doing from our side. What are some of the trainings where we have been able to actually drive the development? And I think that talking about it from a theoretical perspective, talking about the different ingredients you need is one thing, but of course this is all about people. It's the people that makes the projects a success, and that's also why in the last, let's say, section of this webinar, I wanted to talk a little bit about the people themselves. And here I've had the pleasure of taking roughly 100 colleagues through IPMA certification over the last 2.5 years. We had decided within our management teams in North America, how did we want to start pursuing IPMA project management efforts with PMAC in Canada and IPMA US. And here I was also extremely happy that we organized a training. This is from our training center, specifically in Orlando, where you can see a group of people that we had attending training 2 years ago, where I was very happy that we partnered with one of the industry experts in project management in North America, Michael Pace, who was our trainer for this specific session. We managed to do a 4-day in-person face-to-face training with our project managers on B and C level. We had a strong partnership with IPMA US, who delivered the written exam when we were there in person, and then the oral examination and interview was then conducted after the training. But again, a very cool exercise and something where we learned a lot from our side, and certainly that contributed to the development of these fine individuals. You also have some of these members of the training actually had the pleasure of engaging in mentorship agreements with some of the IPMA assessors, which I thought is really cool. We're all here to learn, also the assessors, and I think that was a great lesson learned. The second IPMA training we did in Canada, where we actually decided to use internal trainers, where I was one of the trainers, and I had another colleague, Mitch Mayrand, who contributed to this training. And here I had the pleasure also to welcome in Kevin, who helped out with the certification-specific elements of the written examination. But again, I thought it was a cool way of rounding off the presentation side of this webinar to show some real pictures of the real training that we do in order to drive development of the project managers. If I look at our third training, then we continued based on very positive feedback to actually engage on similar models with doing face-to-face trainings on an ongoing basis. And here you say that we started looking at also having specific targets in place, whether that, for instance, was from a certification perspective or from a satisfaction perspective. But that also meant that we started having an increasing demand from our management teams, but also from our project managers to be part of this development. I think nowadays we do a lot of things virtual, as you see here, and that's also great. But I will also still state here today that having a training face-to-face is just extremely valuable, not just for the execution and the learning part itself, but also of the team building and the ability to connect on a face-to-face manner. So that's been a big success of ours. And of course, here the partnership with IPMA US and PMAG in Canada has enabled us to be able to do that. Lastly, then I wanted to show an example of a fourth training that we did within this framework that was done in Brande, Denmark. Probably very few of you know what is Brande. It's a little town in the middle of Denmark where we have one of our headquarter facilities of Siemens Energy wind power. And here you see a lot of our great colleagues who attended IPMA training on C and D level, and where I was very happy to receive extremely high levels of satisfaction from these efforts, making sure that all our project managers, they were equipped to better understand the 28 competency elements, but also discuss how do you use the aspects of these competency elements with the key competence indicators, and then how do you actually apply it to real projects. And that's where I think we can take into consideration the elements from the IPMA framework, but then how do we apply this on our actual projects? And that's one of the great cool things about doing this in a 1-week training session, where we then discuss the application on our project portfolio. We had here a certification training with participation from 8 different countries, which also again is certainly one of my highlights the past couple of years in our execution of this training side. That was the end of, let's say, the official presentation from my side. Again, hopefully you have benefited from a lot of these details, and hopefully this contribute with your own development. I have included my contact information, and then as you see here with Procept, I'm sure that you can contact both Kevin or myself if you do have any questions. And then I do want to encourage you, stay tuned with these webinars. I think it's an awesome opportunity to drill into a number of relevant topics for project managers. But it's definitely been a pleasure, and I hope we have a couple of questions here as we finish off here later on in the session.
Excellent.
So with that,
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lars. I learned a lot. It was fascinating to see how project management is being handled within Siemens Gamesa, and how the development is handled, the planning of the skills and competences. We actually do have some questions that came in during your presentation, but it's not too late for those of you who wish to enter a question. Please type it into the questions window or the chat window. Either way, get the question to us and we will read them out and have Lars respond. So it's still not too late. While we're waiting, giving you a chance to type those in, I do want to remind you that this is one of a series of webinars that will be running roughly every 2 weeks throughout the year. Wherever you found out about this one, go back and you'll be able to find registration details for some of the other sessions that we have coming up. We have all kinds of topics on project management, leadership development, soft skills, strategic business skills, even some trendy stuff on prompt engineering for AI and things like that. So there's lots there for you to look at. Please take a look, and I'm sure you'll find something of interest. And again, all these are recorded and put on YouTube for later watching in case you missed the live event. It's all part of the give back of us and our sponsors for this series of webinars. Today's webinar was sponsored by the Project Management Association of Canada, PMAC, which Lars referenced in the presentation. It is Canada's representative to IPMA, as well as two PMI chapters, PMI Lakeshore Ontario chapter and PMI Durham Highlands chapter, both co-sponsored this event for the day. So thank you very much for the sponsors for making this event possible. Okay, still take time to type in your questions. First question came from Serena. Lars, Serena says, please tell us more about the IPMA Competence Development Framework, only for PMs, or what other competences are covered?
So I think this is a great question, and thank you very much for raising it. As I showed in one of my slides in my presentation, then we have, for instance, different regulations and ICBs within IPMA, whether that being, for instance, for project manager, program managers, portfolio managers. So also back to your question, no, this also goes beyond project managers, but certainly within these 28 competency elements, then you see a broad aspect of disciplines for project managers. And that's one of the things that we really admire from a Siemens perspective, that this covers many different disciplines that are extremely valuable and required for our project managers to lead the projects. And also the ability to have, let's say, I was going to call it an entry-level certification as a project associate, which is typically used as a team member in the project, is an awesome starting point. And we have been conducting many IPMA D levels that goes in and brings forward this certification as a project associate. So certainly goes beyond just the project manager role. And hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, thank you. The next is two questions that are kind of overlapping. So I'm going to ask both of them, and you can give one consolidated response. Oduluko, I hope I pronounced that correctly, asked, are renewable energy projects more like construction projects or design/engineering projects? And Paulo asked, does the PM manage manufacturing? Sorry, the English isn't good here. Does the PM manage manufacturing and install, or are they separate projects?
That's a very good question as well, and you can imagine that we as a bigger organization in Siemens have different type of projects and different type of processes. But for instance, what I will highlight and also relate to myself and my team is that I have both project managers and product managers, and the development of our new platform and product that goes through a specific product development process, again with specific milestones, phases, and requirements. And here I have, for instance, platform managers in my team who are more or less product managers who go through a product management life cycle process and thereby need to deliver according to that process framework. Then we have a new unit project, which you saw in my presentation, that's very much similar to construction projects that you referenced, where we again have a project execution discipline that we adhere to. And then we have service execution. So many types of different projects and profiles. And I think the key is here from a webinar perspective is that we need to assess what are the requirements for the different roles so we differentiate with what is really required.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. The next question, it sounds like somebody's looking for work. Miriam says, what are the career prospects for a PM in this industry? Are there lots of new PM jobs?
I would say that that's very much depending on of course your location, but you can also see and probably hear in the media that there's a lot of focus on this industry in general, and we have different partners in the industry. Luckily, you see an industry that works closely together. And I'm confident that not only within Siemens, but also many of our fellow friends in the industry, that they hire project managers on an ongoing basis. So I'm confident if you Google a little bit and search around, then there's plenty of opportunities. And again, now at least people here also have my contact information, so you're more than welcome to always follow up with me or connect via LinkedIn.
Certainly, thank you. And from the statistics you showed earlier, it certainly looks like a high growth industry. So there may be some potential there. Okay, the last question that's been entered is not really a question, it's more of a comment. Krista says, the operational readiness PM role description sounds like the requirements for any PM.
Good question. And I'll say yes, there's certainly a lot of different disciplines within an operational readiness project manager role that is default to those of general project managers. But I'll say some of the few examples that I wanted to highlight here that is certainly unique is, for instance, the tools, the IT application that is used to prepare a wind farm for service contract execution. That could be, for instance, training associated with our HSE requirement. That means we use a system called Renewable. It's important that we understand how to do safety reportings. So a lot on the tool side, also the way we do, for instance, availability reporting is very unique both to the industry but also to the company. Here we have specific competency requirements and thereby trainings. Also, you'll see that in readiness, a big portion of this is understanding how we set up your warehouse. So that means familiarity to lean philosophies, those concepts such as lean 5S is another perspective that's extremely important in our competence and training developments. So while it may be appears that it is very much related to those of project managers, then there's a lot of specific ingredients that you will see if I showed you how the real competency and training profile look for this role. Hope that answers the question.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, that's all the questions for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. You can claim PDUs for this session if you're if you have your PMP. You can claim that you can self-declare these. If you're interested in more information on this topic, please reach out to Lars or Procept at procept.com, procept.com. Thank you once again, Lars. That was wonderful. Everybody, have a great day.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for hosting, Kevin.